There are states that provide state affordable housing credits that piggyback onto the federal credit, and that helps a lot to buy down those costs. And in fact, we do a lot of work in Missouri as an example, and they have a state affordable housing credit there. And you can start working on a project and know that a little bit more of that gap is covered before you start spending the money on that. So I mean, a lot of times programs are competitive. There's RFPs to the local municipalities, or there's the federal resources that are allocated by the state are. It's a competitive application process, which is fine, but there's a lot of money that goes into the upfront side of a project. And when the gap is so big that the likelihood of you filling it is very small without everybody jumping on the bandwagon, it makes it more difficult to even start a project. So
perhaps a state matching credit of maybe a certain percentage of whatever the federal credit is.
That's one possibility. I mean, there's other states that do that.
Yeah, I think in general, Wisconsin doesn't have state funds that are allocated to affordable housing because of a constitutional amendment that really disallows state funds to go into construction of infrastructure, and affordable housing was deemed to be part of that. So if you look at Minnesota, for example, they devote a substantial portion of their they have a big percentage of their budget that actually supports affordable housing in the state, because they're allowed to spend state general tax dollars on, it's like $60 million to develop housing. Right, and because I think that we've really lagged behind in the last 5 to 6 years among states in the Midwest, because we don't have the ability to subsidize affordable housing at the state level. And I think that you can see great differences in states. And so if obviously if I could wave a magic wand, you would make that go away so that the state could invest some money in housing. We spoke with legislators especially about the WIDA revenue issue, and it's just not on the radar screen at this point. I suspect as the crisis gets worse, it will be, but we're not addressing it proactively.
Getting on the agenda of the legislators and keeping this issue in front of them, I think, is very important, so we can continue to drive that message.
Actually, neither the city or the county, but at the other municipal level, I mentioned, I think there's a growing interest in the development community. There's growing demand for multifamily housing, whether it's market rate or and there's capacity, I think, in some available TIF dollars locally that could be used to match with the county money and other money. But I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done. The Village of DeForest came to us and asked us to do an analysis of what are the impacts of multifamily housing on things like property values and crime and neighborhood stability. And so we did a literature review and compiled all the evidence. And it was really, the evidence is not. The evidence is generally that there is really not a significant, if any, impact on things like property value and crime and neighborhood stability and fiscal impact and school impact and all those things. In some cases, it's actually more favorable than single-family detached. So that's so educating about that these are really opportunities for communities as opposed to an obligation as they can incorporate it into their overall development plans for their downtown, for new neighborhoods, I think is an opportunity.
The city and the county have, changed their processes to be more receptive to tax credit deals. They've put significant amounts of money into supporting these affordable housing funds. The thing that I would like is patience, because it takes 2 to 3 years for this to sort of start to have an effect. So the money that they put in the budget last year, those units won't open until next fall. So patience and to keep the money flowing in the meantime, so we can keep doing these deals.
When we're talking about the amount of units that are being created, are really only meeting the growing demand, and again, not digging out of the hole. So to say, we're putting all this money in, and we don't see this huge reduction in homelessness, well, yeah, probably not, because we're really only scratching the surface of what we need.